So now you've got your final sample. We are ready to start the fun part, which is extracting and then turning to the analysis of your data. So to do this, we're going to follow a series of steps, and you're going to have our guidance and support along the way as ever. And you're going to need a few tools. One, you're going to want to use either Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. I prefer Microsoft Excel if you have access to it, but Google Sheets is going to be perfectly helpful. And you're again going to make sure that you have all the PDFs or full text versions of the papers that you're looking at in your final sample. You should have had this already because you did the retrieval step, but if you didn't, it's going to be completely useless to you now if you don't have the full text. So you need to make sure that you have that, and you really do need to make sure that you've completed your Prisma, or you run the risk of having to go back several steps and lose time. So make sure you have those in place. What I'm going to begin to do here in this video is show you how to do the extraction. So let me come straight over to an Excel sheet, because that is going to be your guide for setting up step by step what you need to pull out of these articles. So here we are in Excel, and I want to show you how to set up an extraction data sheet in Excel. I'm going to give you a general template, but yours will be customized. And what you're going to see linked in the Kajabi sequence is a series of example data extraction sheets. You're going to have one like the one we're creating now that you can adapt and customize for you. And you can also look at what several other students have done in their extraction for different types of systematic reviews. And that will help you, again, structure and think about what elements of the paper you need to extract from your analysis. All of them are going to have a few certain elements. One is you want the study, which I've listed here. So the study, you usually want the authors et al. And the year. So I'm just going to make something up. Let's say Aloma et al. 2011. The next thing you are going to want to make sure that you always include are going to be the elements of your PICO. These almost certainly need to be in because they're indispensable for defining your study. So a common one would be the population. For some of you, that might also include the country. If the population is, say, students in primary school or grade ages 10 to 15, you want to specify that there, but you might also want to specify the country. I like to specify the country where the study was done. Many of you are looking cross-nationally or in different states and regions, and that's worth specifying here. So some geographic component here, and let's just say the study was done in the US for simplicity. Then, if it's worth specifying, you might want to say the study population. So that could be, for example, let's say ages, and keep that tidy for yourself, ages 11 to 15. No, I don't want the date. 11 to 15 might be your study inclusion. And if the age is important to defining your population, put that. This is going to vary for each of your studies, of course, and vary with your PICO. At that point, I sometimes like to put in here a description of the study, just kind of letting me know what the study was about. And that description can really just be kind of simple and might be only for your notes. You might not use it in the analysis, but it's going to help you stay organized. So put in a description here of the study. And I'm going to go through a couple examples so you can see this in practice. So description is in here. Some of you may decide later that, oh, well, I don't want description there. I want description to be before the country. That's okay. You can play around with this later and change the order of the columns as you like, whatever is going to help you. We're going to come to that in the analysis. Right now, what's important is making sure you have a structured template for getting all the relevant information kind of on the table for you. And I also want to say on that, there is an important overarching guiding principle here. And that principle is you want to extract information to such an extent that you don't have to go back to the study and look at it again. That it will enable you to write up the results section of your paper without having to dig into more details in the PDF. And that's a challenge. I would prefer for you in this stage when you do the extraction to err on the side of taking too much detail, then too little, and then kind of narrowing it and whittling it down later. I hope that makes sense. So err on the side of too much rather than too little detail. This is going to come clear in a second. Okay, so you might have just a brief description of your study and say, then you might want to say what your intervention was. Many of you guys will remember we have an independent variable, a dependent variable, left-hand side, right-hand side, the intervention, the outcome, the exposure. So make sure that those elements are here. Those are really indispensable components of your PICO that need to go in here. And I'll just say here was, say, an intelligent tutoring system. And you might really want to be specific about what it is. Maybe, I'm making one up now, it's the COBRA Intelligent Tutoring System. Okay, so that's your intervention. And then what's another one that's really going to be important for most studies is going to be the method or the study design. Was this a randomized controlled trial? Was this an observational study? Was this a series of qualitative interviews? So say that here. Let's say this was qualitative. Then you want to make sure you include that here. Or if it was quantitative, say it was cross-sectional. Put that there. So that will help you understand the strength of the study and really be able to compare across studies to see if different study types found different things. For those of you looking at randomized controlled trials, you might want to say what the comparison group was. That might be a column that you want to include. It's not strictly necessary in all of yours. It will really depend on how you define your PICO. If it was in your PICO, make sure you include it here. One that is going to be indispensable is going to be the outcome. And here, really want to crisply and tightly define your outcome. So for example, if this was, you were looking at the outcome was the Maslach burnout scale, then you need to put that there and identify that. Or if it was Copenhagen burnout scale, whatever it was, you want crisp, precisely defined outcome, as precisely defined as you possibly can here. So have that outcome there. Then you're going to want the results. What did the study find? And I like to include this and the main findings. Now, if you have a lot of studies that have very similar outcomes, you might want to be very quantitative about this. So this study found, right, that this was the effect size. And maybe you have a lot of studies you can quantitatively compare. In others, it may be enough to just describe what the relationship was, that there was a significant association or a significant improvement from this tutoring system with reducing burnout, hypothetically. So put that in the results here. Again, it can be detailed quantitative where you actually show point estimates and coefficients and numbers. It can also be enough to say, yes, it was significant, no, it wasn't. And you're going to see some concrete examples of this coming up. So results here. And then you might want to have some general conclusions. Maybe the authors drew themselves. This could just be for you, again, to understand the paper and help you when you write up later. And finally, I like to put a little bit of comments or notes. Maybe there's something really interesting as you went through this paper and you're extracting information, you think, that's going to be a useful nugget I want to remember when I write. You're going to have 30, 40 papers potentially, possibly more. You need these notes or it's very easy to get lost as you go along. So put your comments here and make sure that's included. Again, if there are other things that you do feel are important details and need to be precisely defined, you may want to specify them and say, here's the intervention, and say, more specifically, you might need another column to say intervention measurement. Maybe they measured it in multiple ways or different ways, and you need to put that there. Again, this is hard to give you a one-size-fits-all description because your studies are going to differ at this point. What's in your net? It's going to differ across your fields in public health, education, psychology, wherever you're at. But what I can do is give you these important general principles. With that said, let me take you to an example of a review that I did that was for the World Health Organization and show you what my extraction table looked like. And we'll go through a worked out example of how I went about extracting one of the papers into this template. So what you can see here is I've organized my study, the country. I put the description first here. This classification column I did later on. The health outcome that they studied was very important, and I actually, in my analysis later on, I moved that column around and put it up to the front because I was trying to look for different patterns by chronic diseases, health system, different interventions. I specified the intervention, and there were a lot of trials in mind, so I had comparison groups. So I wanted to understand what was going on. You can see I have the method very clearly. And I actually recoded the method later on. That's what I'm saying. Take too much detail now, you can code it and simplify it later. So there were different kinds of pragmatic trials, and I later collapsed that into just pragmatic trial or just observational for the descriptive studies. I was looking at return on investments from risk communications and community engagement programs. And what I did here is I looked at different measures of economic returns. So I had two columns to calculate the outcome. Again, here was my initial column, and later on I collapsed it in my analysis. Don't worry about that now, but I just want to show you what this can actually look like. The outcome I specified as precisely as possible, cost per quality adjusted life year. I understood the acronyms. These were for me at this point. You want to make this, though, as clear and easy for anybody looking at this later to understand, because often you're going to have a variant of the summary table that goes in your paper. It will form a part of your paper, so do try to make it easy to understand. And main findings. You can see here, these were the main findings or the results. And I actually quantified it in this case because there was some sense in quantifying it, because I cared about the return on investment. I wanted to show concrete examples of how much return on investment these kinds of initiatives could have. And here I had methodological notes, which was interesting to me. And you'll see I just copied and pasted. Not every paper I had additional notes, but different. And if I found something interesting that I wanted as a note to myself, I just put it there. You'll notice another thing I did in this sheet that is going to be useful. We're going to come back to that later. Is I've frozen the panes so I can scroll like this and stay on track of the study, where it was done, and look at the different parameters. I'm going to show you how to do that later, but that's going to be really useful to you. And one of the key tests is, can I look at the study now? I haven't looked at this for a while. I forgot about it, and figure out what went on. Okay, so this was Baumick 2017 in the US. Looked at community provision of asthma services, right? That was obviously a chronic disease, and health outcome was asthma. It's a special community asthma initiative. And they did a pragmatic trial, and they took some zip codes where the community asthma initiative took place to neighboring zip codes with no intervention. Okay, that makes sense, the design of what they did. And they tried to see what was the return on investment for this asthma intervention. And they found that with a comparison group, the community asthma initiative resulted in an adjusted ROI of 1.91 over 5 years. So I'm able to go back and report this study and my results without having to turn to the original paper. That's going to save you so much time. So give yourself that clarity and put it here. And it's also important because you want other people who are reading your review to understand what are all these studies saying just at a snapshot without them having to go look at the papers. And also for you later on to be able to start to see things that other people can't see by looking across this set of papers. Figure out why did this one have big ROI in this case and the other ones didn't? Why did some have no effect and some papers had big effects? Did that vary by the method? Did it vary by the comparison group? Did it vary by the country? Were there differences between developing and high-income countries? You can begin to ask so many questions that other people can't once you've done this. It's a very meta way of looking at things, but I find it incredibly exciting and can be very insightful for you to really get a thick understanding of your field that nobody else has. So let me now turn to a practical example, and I'm going to show you, if we're doing this from scratch, how we would do the extraction. So this is one of the papers in the set, and what I want you to do when you get to this paper is I don't want you to read the whole paper. I want you to do the step 2 of our triple pass reading method, which you will find in the Kajabi Foundations course. If you have any trouble accessing that, do reach out, get in touch. But you're just effectively swooping in and getting the necessary details for each point. So let's do the first. Holloway and colleagues, what year are we looking at? 2003. So come back to our sheet. So Holloway et al., 2003. And you're going to get fast at this once you know what to look for. The country, where was the study done? So don't look at the country of the authors, but this looks to be, here we go, in North Wales. So here we go. Let's come back to our extraction table. North Wales. You might want to put the UK if that keeps things simple. A description. So what did they do? I might even just rip this here. It was a cluster. They were trying to enhance informed uptake. So risk communication to enhance informed uptake of cervical screening. So I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to paste special on just text. And sometimes you'll see this happens. That gets kind of annoying. So you might want to click in the actual box and paste in there to get your formatting not to go too funky, like will sometimes happen. Okay, so that's helpful. Classification, that's something I did later, but cervical cancer, this I put down as, this is a tricky one to classify. I'm just going to put it chronic disease for now, even though cervical cancer has infectious origins. That's another conversation that we won't get into. The outcome was cervical cancer. Let's go now and look at the intervention. And here you want to look at the abstract and the methods to really get clarity on what's going on. Here there's a structured abstract. You see how it's structured in these components, which makes it easy for you. So let's take a look. Here we go. They recruited 29 practices, and it was a risk communication practice containing visual material with nurse training. Okay, and here's the outcomes, preferences. So let's say a risk communication package. I think that's not enough. I want to go look a little bit more in the methods and understand the intervention. Here we go. So I'm going straight to the intervention. I'm not reading the whole paper. Brief counseling session by the smear taker. Okay. So so it was a 10-minute counseling session to identify women's perceptions of risks. Okay, so I'm going to put that there. So you're going to have to look at it. So 10-minute counseling session to communicate women. So they identify the women's risk scores, and then they communicate that risk to the women. And they did it in both pictures and numbers. Okay, women's scores in both pictures and numbers. Okay, so those are important details. Who is the comparison group? So now we need to go look. Here we go. 32 practices randomized. So there was 3 dropped out, 15 intervention, 14 control group. So here we go. 15, and I think these were clinical practices. So these were 15 group general practices. 15 group general practices. Received. And you might want to break this out, especially for the randomized controlled trials, to say what the intervention was and then how many groups were in the intervention, how many were in the control, and 14 control general practices. The method here was a randomized controlled trial. And could recode that later. The outcome, let's go to the specific outcome. Here I'm looking at the measures. Stated preferences, so there's a few. So I might only be interested in one of these for my study. Suppose I'm only interested in mental health here. And then I would take the Spiegelberg Anxiety Index and this. So there were 2 mental health outcomes relevant. I'm going to say hypothetically that's the outcome I'm interested in. Here I was actually interested in economic returns. I'm just doing this as an example. So I would say this. I would put these two outcomes, take away the citation. I'll put those there to be very precise about it. Then main findings. I'm going to pull out the main findings. The main findings you're going to find either in the abstract or potentially in the results or the conclusion. You're going to have to hunt around for some of this information, but you know exactly what you're looking for. So conclusions, let's go to the results. And let's see if there's anything on anxiety. So I'll just pull that out here. For the ROI, I had just pulled out this, but let's say I'm doing it for anxiety this time. And it doesn't look like I might even go now and search the PDF to find, oops, don't want that, to find the specific word I'm looking for. So let's go into the find and let's go to anxiety and figure out, here we go, better improvement in measures of anxiety. So that's good. Let's see what they report. So I might have to go, we're more equivocal. Okay. So no effect on perception of personal risk. In terms of the measures here, adjusting for clustering. So I'm coming here and looking for the specific results. Hang on, so I have to go back and forth to look at this. Adjusting for clustering, in terms of the adjusting for clustering led to differences between the groups in favor of the intervention. So this is the result. This is explained in kind of a complex way, but I might just pop this in here for now, and I'll copy the rest, just spilled across a couple pages here. As you can see, that's going to happen in your papers as well. And I might take too much, and then later on, I might paraphrase this and put it back in my own words. So let me just see if there might be a better way you can say this. And as I look at this, I can see both of these, actually there was no effect. So I would restate this to say there was no effect of the intervention on anxiety. And you sometimes see this, that sometimes what the researchers report is different from what's in the actual paper or in their results section. This is an example of that, where they said here that better improvement in measures of anxiety, that was not significant. So this is a little bit stretching what they found. So don't be concerned. Sometimes you will see authors misreport their own findings, as in this paper, in a way that could be misleading or unclear. You just want to stay true to what the actual findings are. And at this point, then I would also include a section on conclusions. I had main findings here. I took out conclusions later, but if I were going to include conclusions, I might highlight something from the conclusion here, could benefit and may relieve anxiety. So I might just copy and paste this sentence and pop that in conclusions. And there you are. There you have an example of how to do your extraction, how to set up your extraction table, step by step, going through each paper, hunting forensically for those details you need, and ensuring you have captured in a way that makes it easy for you to write up your results section and for other people to understand your summary table to see what these papers are saying. Hope you find that helpful and have a crack at doing this yourself. See the example of different data extraction sheets from people who have come before you. Use those, draw on what's helpful. You might find as you do the extraction, you think, I really need another column. There's more details for my intervention or more for my outcome that I need to unpack. That's perfectly okay. Don't feel bad about that. When I made this table the first time, I ended up updating it, and you can see I added different columns along the way, and later on there is inevitably some messiness as you're looking now at all your data and all its messiness, and you're trying to create order and come to the point, as we're going to get to in the analysis, of trying to identify patterns and tendencies in your data. Hope you enjoyed this. I think this is a particularly fun part, and again, if you do feel lost and you're doing this for the first time, that's perfectly okay. That's when I want you to make sure you don't shy away or withdraw, but especially lean in to get support from one of the multiple avenues that are available to you. Look forward to seeing you in the next video on analysis.